Good evening, Facebook. It is Sunday, April the 12th, 2020, and it's currently 6:07 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I prepared absolutely nothing for today's stream, broadcast, whatever you want to call it. I like calling it a broadcast. It gives it more of a veneer of credibility, I think. Anyway, I didn't want to talk about the news of the day today. I didn't want to talk about the pandemic. I didn't want to talk about money. I didn't want to talk about Washington, D.C. politics. Today is Easter Sunday. And as I mentioned in my previous stream, I'm not a practicing Christian, but Easter has always been a significant day of my year. And today is no exception to that. Today also happens to be the 7-year anniversary of the day that I left Omaha, Nebraska to begin driving here to Washington State. The 14th will be the anniversary of the date on which I arrived in Washington, and I'll do a more focused monologue about that on Tuesday. But today, Easter, the time of renewal and rejuvenation, and the renewal of life, at least according to Christian theology. And I think it's only fitting that I should devote some time in my stream today to my experience leaving Omaha to start a brand new life 1,500 miles away. Marcus, thank you. Appreciate that. My friend Marcus says, happy anniversary, bro. Appreciate that. So I had been making plans to leave Omaha for some 7 months before I actually took the plunge, as it were. I made the decision to visit this place in September of 2012. I was working at a job, a carpet cleaning company in Nebraska called Steam Away of Nebraska. And because of the mentality and the beliefs and the way that the owner and the management of that company treated their employees, I came to call the company Self-Esteem Away. And let me say that I strongly discourage anyone from utilizing their services if they even are still in business. But I digress. The only good thing to come from my experience working at that company was that it was the first time in my life that I had ever earned a full week's worth of paid vacation. And I made the decision to use it to either visit New York City or to visit the Pacific Northwest. Now, why New York City? Because I love architecture. I love tall buildings. And Chicago and New York City are the two cities in the United States, arguably, that have the most impressive skylines. And I wanted to see New York. I wanted to see Ground Zero. I wanted to see with my own eyes the progress of the rebuilding of Lower Manhattan after the 9/11 attacks. And I actually made a lot of progress towards that goal. I made my mind up early on that I was going to visit New York City. I went so far as to establish an account on couchsurfer.org. I figured if I could let people stay at my place who were passing through Omaha and develop a good reputation, that it might be easier for me to find a place to sleep for free or for cheap in New York City, and just give me the freedom to wander around and look at buildings and such. And as time went by, it started to feel like less and less realistic of a goal. I actually knew people in the Pacific Northwest because an old friend of mine had moved to the Northwest in 2004, and it would perhaps make more sense and be safer and smarter to visit a place where I actually had someone with whom I could meet and who could help me explore the area. So eventually I changed my mind, came out here and visited the place. And it was upon seeing Mount Rainier for the first time when I made the decision that this is where I wanted to start my life anew. Mount Rainier, for anyone who hasn't seen it, you can see as many pictures of it as you want. Some pictures come close to giving you a sense of scale, like a picture taken from an airplane at a distance, and you can see a cityscape in the foreground and then enormous Mount Rainier behind it. That kind of gives you an idea of just the absolute magnitude of this thing, this giant volcano sitting just south of here. But you have to actually see it with your own eyes for the immensity of it to be perceptible. And the first time I saw it, it absolutely changed my life. It's one of those moments where everything about the way that you see the world changes like that forever. And when I came back to Omaha from there, from that trip, the first thing I said when my parents picked me up from the airport was, I want to live there. And 7 months later, after careful planning, saving a lot of money, in fact, I even moved out of the apartment in which I was living and into the basement of a friend of mine who only charged me $200 a month for rent. I quit the job at Self-Esteem Away and took two jobs, one at a call center and one delivering pizzas. And I worked 7 days a week without fail, except for one day when I was literally too ill to get out of bed in the morning. Other than that, I worked every day, 7 days a week, from September until April. And when I had saved enough money and made enough preparations, then the day came. I met with my dad at Brugger's Bagels near 40th and Dodge in Midtown Omaha. And anybody watching, hello, Brad. Great to see you too. Is Brugger's Bagels in Omaha still open? They were near 40th and Dodge. I'd be interested to know that. I guess I could look it up, but it would be more fun if one of you would just tell me, right? Anyhow, I met with my dad for breakfast at Brugger's Bagels. We sat together across the table eating bagels. I think I had my usual Thai peanut chicken bagel and a cup of coffee. And my dad sat there, and that was an odd conversation because I was about to embark on perhaps the craziest and stupidest and most exciting adventure of my life. Because I didn't get a driver's license until I was nearly 28 years old. And at this point, I was only 32. I'd had my driver's license for just over 4 years. And I had maybe once or twice driven more than an hour at a time. I think once I drove out to Elkhorn, Iowa and back. And then I think that my dad and I were returning from a trip to St. Louis, and he was ill, so I had to take over part of that drive. But for all intents and purposes, I had never driven any appreciable distance in my life. And here I was about to drive from Omaha, Nebraska to Seattle, Washington, alone. Well, not completely alone. I had my cat at the time, and boy, trying to take a cat on a long road trip, I'm just not going to mention that part of it because that wasn't fun for either of us. But we sat at that table trying to make small talk, trying to have a conversation, not knowing entirely how to relate to each other within the context of that talk. And then as soon as we finished eating, it was time, you know, walking out to the parking lot and getting in the car. And instead of driving to my apartment or to wherever I was staying in Omaha, I just headed for I-80 and started driving west. The drive across Nebraska. I remember driving and getting past Lincoln. As I said, I really like looking at tall buildings, so I was on the lookout for the Nebraska State Capitol building, which we affectionately refer to as the Prick of the Prairie back home because of its distinctive shape. I think it is the tallest state capitol building anywhere in the country, I think. And I remember once I got past Lincoln, I really started feeling like I was out in the wilderness. I remember getting as far as North Platte and having to stop to refresh myself, being surprised that from that distance I could still pick up certain Omaha radio stations. Made a phone call to my dad to let him know I was still alive, and just continued driving. The plan for that evening was to stop in Denver. A former band member of mine named Bobby was and still is living in Denver, and he put me up for the night. I remember arriving in Denver and seeing that city skyline, and it just dawned on me, like, my God, I drove myself to Denver. It was a surreal experience. And Bobby met up with me, went back to his place. I think we went out for a drink and for dinner together. and we hung out at his place. Then I fell asleep. I couldn't relax enough to socialize with him because the next day was to be the longest leg of the drive, and it would turn out to be also easily the most stressful. But on April 12th is the day that I drove from Omaha to Denver on my way out here to Washington. Maybe tomorrow I'll talk a little bit about what the experience driving the second day was. The second day was from Denver to Mountain Home, Idaho, which is the city in which myself and my two siblings all were born. That turned out to be a little too long. I made it the second day, but it was the epitome of biting off more than you could chew. So I'll talk about that probably more tomorrow. But yeah, today's kind of a big day in terms of anniversaries. 7 years ago today, I left Omaha to start my life over. So it's kind of fitting that on Easter Sunday, a day that signifies the renewal of life, it happens to be the anniversary of the day that I took the plunge, as it were, the biggest proactive step I ever have taken in my life with respect to starting over and to starting new. So that's kind of where my mind is today. Last night, I took a very, very long walk. Um, I walked just from my house directly north, and I found myself wandering through really, really nice neighborhoods in the old town part of Tacoma. And I think I was probably out for about 3 hours. And those of you who do a lot of running and a lot of cardio will be able to appreciate the concept of runner's high. You get a certain euphoria that goes along with just, you get into a zone. One of my favorite things used to be to eat two edibles, THC edibles, and then go hit the gym and spend an hour on an elliptical trainer, because I'd get this blend of the runner's high euphoria enhanced by the THC, and it just felt great. I don't do it anymore because once you come down from that, you feel absolutely spent and useless. So I don't use the THC shit anymore. But last night I actually managed to attain that just by virtue of how long and how far I walked. And it was night. I think I got home exactly at midnight. And so the stars were out. All the city lights were on. It was quiet because every restaurant and bar is closed. There's not a lot of people driving around. The air was clean and pleasant to breathe. And I was just outside wandering around looking at these beautiful houses built into these really steep hillsides in the north end in the old town neighborhoods of Tacoma. And it was an adventure in itself. And I got home feeling as though I had just had a spiritual experience. And that feeling continued into today. I took a long drive up to the Hood Canal Bridge, and then I found that if you turn, my goal was to be able to see Mount Baker, because I caught a glimpse of it from here in town. There are a couple spots within Tacoma from which you can see Mount Baker. And for those of you who don't know, it's over 100 miles north of Tacoma. It's very, very near to the Canadian border. The closest major town is the city of Bellingham. And there are a couple spots within Tacoma from which Mount Baker is visible. And after having seen it at a distance with my binoculars, I decided it was worth taking a trip to get a somewhat closer look at it. And you can see it very well as you're driving across the Hood Canal Bridge. So my goal was to find some spot near there from which I could see it, and I succeeded. I also took my camcorder with me, which actually has a fairly impressive optical zoom, and I was able to find a spot after considerable driving and hiking from which I could see Mount Baker to the north. Directly east was Glacier Peak, also one of the Cascades volcanic peaks, and Mount Rainier also was visible, all from one spot. So I was able to get a really nice panoramic view of all of these three mountain peaks. And I'm going to put together a video and maybe post it to YouTube or even upload it here. So that was my experience of the last couple days. It's all about exploration. Certainly there's a lot of time on everyone's hands. I've been using it to go do something I've loved doing ever since I was little, which is walking long distances and finding myself in some place where I've never been and finding an awesome view. And last night and today both were successful in that regard. So that's all I'm going to do for today. Just talk about something that I did and that I've done the last couple of days that made me happy, and to commemorate the day that I left my old life behind to come out here and start a new one. So with that, happy Easter, everybody. I hope everyone is staying safe. A friend of mine texted me today, a good friend of mine, and he's saying that he's bummed out. He says he's tired of feeling like he's in prison. I hope everybody listening to this can appreciate what that means. A lot of you probably are still working. A lot of my friends and acquaintances are essential employees working essential jobs. But a job is essential to everyone's life. And for many of us, not being able to have that is doing intense and severe psychological, not damage, but it's inflicting a lot of psychological stress. And one of my friends expressed to me today that it's really starting to get to him. So with that in mind, I just hope everybody can appreciate the people who are working people at the grocery stores, doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals of all types, and bear in mind that a lot of us are going through an experience for which we never had any preparation, and that some of us are struggling. I've been fortunate in having something to get out and do, making an effort to do a broadcast every single day, but some people are having difficulty adjusting to this, and that's an understatement. So reach out to your friends and make a sincere gesture of camaraderie and help people that you care about remember that they're not alone. And as always, be safe and be good to each other. Peace.